Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the second game in a planned trilogy, which is a remake of the original Final Fantasy VII, and we're here to review it. Sorry about the long wait. I know I said, or I don't even remember what the last video I did was, but I know I said that this would be my next video, and I've kept to that. I've been trying my best to get through as much of the game as I could. That includes all side content, and I've managed to rack up over 100 hours. I wanted to make sure I could provide a comprehensive review for everyone, and I wanted to be able to talk about the story to the smaller details and other moments in the game. The only thing I haven't done in the game is play through the game on hard mode. I haven't done the legendary and brutal combat simulations and some of the mini-games such as the Musclehead Coliseum. I didn't complete everything there, but I've done every story content, I've played every mini-game. Some of them I've maxed out, some of them I haven't. I've done a lot in this game to be able to talk about it, so let's get right into it. There are going to be very heavy spoilers ahead in this review, so keep that in mind going forward. First up, we're going to change up what I normally do, and this time we're going to talk about gameplay first. We're going to go over movement, as well as side content and some other aspects of the game in this section. So let's just start off with the movement. Certain actions in this game just feel so slow and sluggish, especially when it comes to traversal, world traversal. Even with the chocobos, it really depends on which chocobo, but just when you're running sometimes, the tiniest little bump can stop you in your stride. Climbing up walls is so slow. I feel like every action I took in this game could have been cut down by half. Just feels like unnecessary movement that's padding for time, especially when we've just had Final Fantasy XVI. I'm not saying that's perfect, by the way. That has its own movement issues, but it just feels more fluid, especially combat-wise, and we'll get into combat a bit later. Some of the movement in this game is fine, some of the traversal I should say, especially in Nibelheim with the water jet ability with the chocobo. So I really enjoyed that area. Was my favourite area to traverse in the game, and there's a reason why. It was smaller and the chocobo was just way better. Now, movement aside, combat, I've seen a lot of people praise the combat, and it's definitely worthy of praising. It's better than Remake was. There are a lot more options in terms of stuff like synergy abilities, and it's just more interesting, I guess, is where I'm going with it. It's not my favourite. Traditionally, I do like turn-based combat more than anything, which might be a shock to most, but I do like action games, and I feel like Final Fantasy XVI had my preferred combat system, just because it was fun to use all those abilities. But Rebirth is a completely different style. I can see why a lot of people love it. It's certainly good. It's good. I wouldn't put it above good. I feel like there's a lot of improvements that could be made to it, and I'm excited to see what they do with it in the third game. But for now, I wouldn't say it's any lower or higher than that. Now, let's get onto some of the side content, because I have a lot to talk about here. We're going to start off with what is the best side content here, which is the proto-relic quests. They were great for the most part, and while they do deliver their own sort of side story, they still fit in with the main quest really well. The last few quests were definitely a bit of a challenge and required grinding to max level, which, if you want to grind to max level, don't even bother before you see the credits roll. Finish the game and go to chapter select, and then just go back, because level grinding is just way better after you finish the credits. It genuinely, I think you get a boost, plus you have all the extra materia such as EXP up. It's just a way better experience. I grinded from, I think, level 51 to level 70 in maybe 2 hours, and that was awesome. I really wish I knew about this before I got to the end of the game, because I'd done some, I wouldn't say I've done some grinding, but I was kind of stuck on trying to redo the missions, the Proto-Relic quests that were very hard, and then realised, oh, you should be level 70 for this. That is my advice. Going back to the last set of Proto-Relic quests, the final fight, and if I didn't say it before, I'll say it again, big spoilers ahead. Gilgamesh was one of the most satisfying boss fights in the game for me, due to its simplistic nature and actually being a fairly balanced boss fight. There are a few fights in this game that just come with their own difficulty spikes at weird moments, and this isn't one of them, surprisingly, for being the secret final boss, I guess. I actually quite enjoyed playing this one. Really nice way to cap off what was a set of difficult quests. In terms of other Proto-Relic quests, the Junon ones were really good. That's the Fort Condor ones, I believe. Also quite liked Cosmo Canyon. Now we get to the other side content that I will talk about, specifically the side quests. They were very hit or miss for me for the most part, but they were really great in developing the relationships between the party. It was awesome that each side quest kinda got attached to another member of the party, and yeah, I liked them for what they were there. However, most of the side content and exploration in the world kind of revolves around Chadley, not necessarily the side quests, but the side content, and I don't know how to feel about that. It wasn't the most interesting way to go through everything, and again, it's just another example of an open world being padded with extra content that isn't all that interesting. I would have really enjoyed having to fight the summons in the open world rather than in a simulation, but it is what it is. The main story dungeons and the main story path are great throughout, to be honest. There's no real complaints until we get later on. Chapter 11 is a big one, kind of breaks up the normal formula a little bit. There's a significant difficulty spike. You play a lot of the chapter as Kate Sith, and some of the bosses take a little bit of extra care to handle, especially if you're someone like me who hadn't been using Kate Sith at all until that moment. I didn't have a problem with the box throwing sections like other people had, but it is something to bring up here because it is a very divisive moment in the game. Chapter 13 is also brought up a lot online, and for me, while yes, it was a bit long, maybe could have been shorter, it wasn't that bad. I've played way worse, and I actually preferred it to Chapter 11 if I'm being honest. Now, I'm going to address the minigames, and some people disagree, some people agree. I've seen people say online that you shouldn't be complaining about the amount of minigames in the game because they're mostly optional, which isn't the case really, because a lot of them link into other pieces of side content such as the Proto-Relic quests and the side quests, and even the main story for the most part. For me, it's not necessarily the amount of minigames that's the problem, it's the depth of each one, and I'll explain that. So each minigame will have its normal modes, and there's like 50 of them, and for me that's enough. You know, like you've got to play a minigame to get the high score, and then you come back later on in the game and there's a hard mode now. Or you go to the gold saucer and there's 20 chocobo races, and the last few are really, well, I didn't struggle that much with the chocobo races, I'll be really honest, but the last few were quite long and difficult as well. They could be difficult, and I get it, a lot of people will spend hundreds and hundreds of hours. I beat this game in just over 100 hours. I did every chocobo race, won every chocobo race. I've done a lot of stuff in this game, but I think there's just too much to everything. I think they really need to pick some content out, maybe have the chocobo races, maybe have Queen's Blood. Queen's Blood was awesome, by the way. The best side content in the game. I really loved everything there. I did every Queen's Blood thing you could in the game, every battle, every gold saucer thing, everything in Costa del Sol. Just, I loved Queen's Blood, and I hope we get something like the Gwent game, or they adapt it a bit more, improve it for the third game. I think they needed to focus on improving these minigames, because Queen's Blood could have been so much more. I feel like they put out a base of what they wanted the card game to be, and there's a lot there, don't get me wrong, but I feel like if they'd put more energy into that and less into having a hard mode for every minigame, or having to do sit-ups against 5 different people, I don't know. There's certain minigames that didn't need as much depth as others did, I guess is where I'm going with this. I'm not a huge fan of the way minigames are in this game. I'm fine with playing all of them once, and for the most part I did play all of them once. Some of them I played multiple times to get the high score on, and then by the end of the game I was just burnt out with having to replay minigames 2-3 times each, especially when there's so many of them. If you're into that sort of thing, there is something here for you. Not necessarily for me, although I didn't exactly hate any of the minigames. Just having to do the hard mode stuff on it, not really for me, and that kind of takes it down a little bit. But yeah, overall, side content in this game is great for the most part. I have my problems with it, maybe too much of it, maybe there's too much depth in certain areas where there could have been more in other areas. It is what it is, and if you enjoy that sort of stuff, there is something to love in this game for you. Now let's get to the story. The story's great overall, despite complaints that it lacks direction. I've seen a lot of people say that. I'm personally a big fan of the journey over the destination. As you may know if you've seen my Mass Effect rankings, that's why I have Mass Effect 3 very high, because I enjoy the journey of that game rather than where it ends up. So, like I said, it's not really a negative to me, as long as the story that's told along the way is entertaining. And I also believe that the lack of direction is purposeful in this game. The characters don't really know what to do until later on. The general plan is to follow the black robes and see what happens. It's simple and it's hardly story of the decade, sure, but it works and really masters individual character storytelling. There are moments in this game that are just so good, especially later on, where we focus more on Aerith, where Barrett gets his moment, where Tifa gets her moment, Cloud starts to experience a change. I think the character storytelling is expertly crafted in this game, and it's one of my favourite parts about it. Like I said, the game really excels in its individual character moments and the story told throughout the game. I especially loved being able to play as each of the main characters, well, the main party members, during different sections of the story, even if I'm not in a rush to go back to certain moments in chapters. The introduction of Cid and Vincent in Rebirth was an excellent choice, and saving their personal stories and the ability to use them in combat for the third game just gives me something to look forward to, and I'm intrigued by both characters and I want to get to know them better, so they got me on the hook there. I did also love the addition of a Vincent boss fight in Rebirth, just awesome. It really elevated what was one of the weaker chapters in the game for me, even though I love Nibelheim. Also want to talk about Zack's return. Really fun and a good surprise to be able to play as him in the final moments. I had a bunch of theories about what was happening with his story, whether it was an alternate universe, a dream, and I didn't really get those answers. We got hints of what the answer could be, but let's just say it was nice to have Cloud and Zack fight side by side against Sephiroth. That was a really cool moment for me. And speaking of Cloud, his arc during this game is really compelling. The slow build to becoming essentially Sephiroth's puppet towards the end is fantastic. I'm interested in where they take this, as he's clearly still under the influence of Sephiroth in some form, now with the addition of seeing things that may or may not be there. So yeah, the third game really has me interested to see where they go. And also Sephiroth, I will talk about Sephiroth. He isn't in this game all that much, but he makes an impact. He's one of the best villains in gaming, and there's a reason for it. He's just such an interesting character, so cool, and yeah, that hasn't changed here. There's not much to say about him. He's the final boss once again. It'll be the final boss in some regard, I guess, in the third game, but he's an awesome character. Before I get into my next part, I do want to talk about the music in this game. I love the music. There's not much to talk about here, except that it's excellent. Every Final Fantasy game has excellent music. There's no shock here. There is music in this game that plays once and is just incredible and then is just never heard about again. The breadth of music in here is insane, and if you're a big music fan in video games, you are going to have a good time just sitting and listening to what this game brings to your ears. It's phenomenal, as always, and again, that's a big part of what my reviews are. I take music into account, and I love this. And now let's dive into the ending a bit more. The mixed one for me. I enjoyed the fight. The switching between characters wasn't as annoying as I thought it would be. Maybe I was slightly overleveled for it. I don't know. But the actual story left me with more questions than answers. They really wanted to leave us guessing as to what Aerith's fate was, and it came off really convoluted, and part of me is still convinced that she isn't truly gone, especially with all this alternate world stuff that's going on. I think they tried to have their cake and eat it at the same time, you know, that old saying. I've heard a lot of people say that as well, and I agree, but I didn't dislike it. Just, it was weird. It wasn't what I expected them to do. Like I said, it was still enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to the third game, see how they cap off the story for this remake trilogy. Now, what would I rate this game? It's a solid 9 out of 10 for me. There's a lot of issues I have with it, especially with movement and some side content padding, but I don't play a game for 100 hours unless I enjoy it, and I enjoyed it. The combat was fun for the most part, the characters were awesome, one of the best Final Fantasy casts. There's no doubt, I don't think there was a doubt that it's one of the best. You know, nothing's changed here. So yeah, it's a 9 out of 10. If I was going to look back and rate Remake in a review, I would have given that an 8. So this is a level above that. It might be a controversial decision to most people, I don't know. Remake was an 8 for me, but Rebirth is a 9, and I'm hoping the third game, whatever it's called, Reborn, Reunion, don't think they'll do Reunion because Crisis Core, but whatever it's called, I hope that's a 10, and it has the opportunity to be a 10. I think they improved a lot from what Remake was, and I think they'll get a lot of feedback from this game, and I'm just excited to see where they go. So 9 out of 10, let me know what you thought of Rebirth, and I'm curious as well, did you prefer Final Fantasy XVI or did you prefer Rebirth? I know there's a lot of people that prefer one over the other. Final Fantasy fans are an interesting beast. I too am a Final Fantasy fan, so I know a lot of people's opinions change. I know mine could change, it could flip-flop between one or the other. I'm very excited to play the Final Fantasy XVI DLC coming out in April. So yeah, there's a good time to be a Final Fantasy fan in my opinion. We're getting some of the best content we've had in years. So yeah, let me know what you thought, like I said. And I don't know what my next video will be, but we'll have one out soon. So we'll see you next time.